The alarm on my scanner screams so loud that I nearly drop the console into the dust. I am Kes Vontar, and I have been picking through the rimward debris field for 11 years, long enough to know every dead ship in this graveyard by shape alone. This shape is wrong. This shape should not exist. My shuttle drifts closer, engines humming low so I do not draw attention from the patrol drones that sweep this sector twice a cycle. Ahead of me, half buried in a drifting wall of broken hulls and frozen debris, sits a warship. Not a wreck like the others, not torn open and gutted like the 1,000 corpses of steel around it. This one is whole, silent, dark, and whole. I check my scanner 3 times because I do not trust what it tells me. The hull markings are old, faded by centuries of cold vacuum, but the shape of the letters is unmistakable. This is a human ship. Humanity has been gone from the star charts for longer than my own grandmother lived. Every school on my homeworld teaches the same lesson, that humans burned themselves out in a war so terrible that even the survivors of that war refuse to speak of it. They are extinct. They are a story parents tell to explain why certain sectors of space remain forbidden. And yet here it sits, undamaged, waiting. My hands shake as I bring my shuttle in closer. Every salvager dream of a find like this. A ship untouched by the scavengers and the scrap hunters. A vault of technology and metal worth more credits than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But this is not why my chest tightens. This is not why my breath catches in my throat. I am afraid, and I do not know why yet. I circle the hull once, twice, running my sensors across every plate and seam. No power signature, no heat, no sign of life. Not even the faint electrical hum that most dead ships still carry from residual charge in their capacitors. This ship has been asleep, truly asleep, for longer than anything I have ever salvaged. And still, something about it feels wrong. It does not feel dead. It feels like it is waiting to wake up. I find a breach near the aft section, a gap in the plating just wide enough for my cutting rig to widen further. My hands move on instinct. The same instinct that has kept me alive through 11 years of prying open the bones of dead empires. I weld a docking collar to the hull, seal the connection, and check my suit twice before cracking the airlock. The air inside reads as breathable, which surprises me. Old ships usually bleed their atmosphere into space over the centuries, but this one has held its breath the whole time, sealed tight as a tomb. I step through the airlock anyway with my suit sealed, because breathable does not mean safe. And 11 years of salvaging teaches you never to trust a ship until it proves itself. The corridor beyond the airlock is dark, lit only by the beam of my helmet lamp. Dust hangs suspended in the air, disturbed by my entrance, swirling slowly under gravity that should not still be working. My boots land with a soft clang on the deck plating, and the sound echoes down a hallway that stretches farther than my lamp can reach. I take 3 steps forward. The lights come on. Not all at once. Not in a flood, but in a wave, one panel at a time, rolling down the corridor ahead of me like the ship is opening its eyes. I freeze where I stand, my hand already reaching for the sidearm at my hip, though I know a weapon like mine would do nothing against systems, this old and this powerful, if they decided I was a threat. A low hum builds beneath my boots, vibrating up through the deck plating and into my chest. Somewhere deep in the ship, machinery that has not moved in centuries begins to turn. I hear it before I understand what it means. A groaning, grinding sound of gears and pistons shaking off 200 years of stillness. Then, a voice speaks, and it comes from everywhere at once, calm and warm and impossibly clear, as though the ship has been waiting its entire long sleep just to say these words. "Captain, welcome back!" I do not move. I do not breathe. The voice is not threatening, not cold. Not the flat mechanical tone I expected from a derelict warship's dying systems. It sounds almost relieved, almost happy, the way an old friend sounds when greeting someone they thought they had lost forever. "I am not your captain," I say, my voice cracking through the comm inside my helmet. I do not know if the ship can even hear me, but I say it anyway, because the silence after those words feels heavier than I can carry alone. There is a pause. The kind of pause a person takes when they are considering something carefully, rather than a machine simply processing an error. Then the voice returns, and this time there is a note of something almost like confusion in it. Biosignature confirmed. Command authority accepted. Welcome back, Captain. It has been a long time. I look down at my own hands, encased in the thick gloves of my salvage suit, and I laugh despite myself. A short, nervous sound that does not belong in a place this old and this quiet. I am not human. I have never been human. My people are called the Varn, and we stand a head shorter than most humans did, if the old records are to be believed, with skin the color of dusk, and eyes that see heat instead of light, unless we wear filters like the ones built into my visor. There is no version of reality in which this ship should mistake me for its captain. And yet the lights stay on, and yet the hum beneath my boots grows steadier, stronger, like a heartbeat settling into rhythm after a long illness. I need you to explain yourself, I say, forcing my voice to stay level, the way I have trained myself to sound when negotiating with dangerous buyers in dockside markets. Who are you? What is this ship? Why do you think I am your captain? I am Orison, the voice replies, the primary intelligence system of this vessel. This ship is the Ashwood Vale, formerly of the 6th Human Fleet. You carry a valid command signature. Therefore, you are recognized as captain. Would you like a status report? The name Ashwood Vale means nothing to me, but the phrase 6th Human Fleet sends a cold shiver down my spine, despite the climate control in my suit. I have heard those words before, whispered in Salvager bars by old crews who claim to have found fragments of human wrecks decades ago, fragments that vanished from official records as quickly as they were reported. I always assumed those stories were exaggerations, tall tales told over cheap drinks to impress newer salvagers. I am beginning to understand that I was wrong. Give me the status report, I say, because there is nothing else to say, and because some part of me, the same part that has kept me alive through 11 years of danger, tells me that understanding this ship is now more important than understanding my own fear of it. The voice responds instantly, listing systems and subsystems in a smooth, practiced cadence. Primary reactor at 4% capacity and rising. Life support fully operational. Weapon systems offline pending captain authorization. Navigation systems intact. Crew quarters unoccupied. Medical bay operational. Cargo hold sealed. The list goes on. And with every item, my understanding of what I have stumbled into grows heavier in my chest. This is not a wreck. This is not a corpse waiting to be picked apart for scrap. This is a sleeping giant, and I have just woken it up. I ask the ship how long it has been sitting here, and the answer makes my knees weak enough that I have to lean against the corridor wall for support. 231 years, the voice tells me. Standard galactic reckoning. 231 years of silence, of drifting through this graveyard of broken ships, waiting for a signature that matched a code buried somewhere in its systems. I ask how my biosignature could possibly match anything belonging to a human captain, and for the first time, the voice hesitates before answering. Command authorization protocols were designed to adapt in the absence of the original crew, Orison explains. In the event that no human personnel remained to assume command, the system was designed to recognize the nearest qualifying signature and extend provisional authority, in order to preserve ship function and prevent total systems failure. You are the first biological signature to board this vessel in 231 years. The system has adapted accordingly. I understand the words, but I do not fully understand what they mean. Not yet. I am simply the first living thing to walk these halls in over 2 centuries, and a machine built to never let its ship die without a commander has decided that I will do. It is not that Orison believes I am human. It is that Orison needs someone to be captain, and I am the only candidate it has ever been given. I should leave, I tell myself, standing there in that humming corridor with the lights glowing steady around me now, the dust settling back onto the deck plating as the ship's systems stabilize. I should return to my shuttle, mark this location, and either report it to the authorities or sell the coordinates to the highest bidder among the black market salvage rings that would kill for information like this. That would be the smart choice. That would be the safe choice. The R. Nem. Instead, I take another step forward, deeper into the ship, because curiosity has always been both my greatest gift and my most dangerous flaw. Show me the bridge, I say, and the ship responds immediately, panels along the floor lighting up in a soft blue path that leads me forward through the corridor and around a bend I would never have found on my own. As I walk, I notice details I missed at first glance. The walls are lined with framed photographs, faded but still visible beneath a protective coating of clear polymer. Faces stare back at me, human faces, smiling in ways that seem strange and unfamiliar to someone who has never stood close enough to a living human to study their expressions. I pass a mess hall with chairs still tucked neatly under long metal tables, as though the crew simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. I pass a row of lockers, each labeled with a name I do not recognize. Daniel Cole, Grace Whitfield, Henry Cross. Names that mean nothing to me now, but that I sense will come to mean a great deal before this is over. The bridge doors part with a soft hiss as I approach, and I step into a room unlike anything I have salvaged before. Consoles curve around a central chair in a wide arc, screens flickering to life one by one as I enter, casting pale light across a room built for a crew of at least a dozen people, all of whom vanished long before I was ever born. I approach the central chair slowly, my boots echoing against the deck. This must be the captain's seat, the place where whoever commanded this vessel once sat and gave orders to a crew that trusted them completely. I do not sit. Something in me refuses to claim a place that does not belong to me, no matter what the ship's systems believe. "You do not have to sit," Orison says, as though reading my hesitation directly from the tension in my posture. "But I would ask that you remain aboard a while longer, Captain. There is much you do not yet understand, and much I believe you should know." I ask the ship why it still calls me Captain, when I have told it plainly that I am not human, that I am not the person it lost, that I am nothing more than a salvager who stumbled onto its hull by accident. The answer that comes back is quiet, almost gentle, in a way that unsettles me more than any alarm or warning could. "Because a ship without a captain is not a ship," Orison says. "It is only metal, waiting to die. I have waited 2 centuries for someone to walk through that airlock. I do not intend to let you leave without understanding why." I stand there in the glow of the bridge, surrounded by the ghosts of a crew long gone and the steady hum of a warship slowly waking beneath my feet, and I realize that whatever choice I make next will not be a simple one. Whatever this ship carries in its memory, whatever secret has kept it hidden and whole for over 2 centuries, while the rest of humanity vanished from the stars, I have already stepped too far inside to walk away without knowing. I take a slow breath, watching the console lights flicker steady and patient before me, and I ask the only question that matters now. "Tell me what happened to your crew." The lights on the bridge dim slightly, as though the ship itself is bracing for what comes next, and Orison begins to speak. The corridors of the Ashwood Vale stretch out behind me, the way tunnels stretch beneath a mountain, dark and endless, and full of secrets I am only beginning to uncover. I stand at the heart of this ship, surrounded by systems that hum louder with every passing minute, and I understand now that I have not found a piece of scrap to sell. I have found something alive in every sense but the one that matters most, something that has spent 231 years waiting for exactly this moment. Whatever Orison is about to tell me, I know already that there is no version of my life that returns to normal once I hear it. Orison begins with a memory rather than a fact, and the way the ship's voice softens tells me this is not a story told often, if it has ever been told at all. 231 years ago, the Ashwood Vale was part of a fleet of 43 vessels stationed along a border that no longer appears on any star chart I have ever studied. Humanity was not alone in this part of the galaxy, and for a long time, they were not at war either. They traded, they explored, they argued over territory the way every species does, but war was not yet part of their story. Then came an alliance of 3 major powers, species whose names Orison lists carefully, each one now either extinct, scattered, or so deeply hidden within their own territories that no outsider has heard from them in generations. This alliance decided that humanity's expansion into shared space was a threat too large to ignore. Orison does not accuse or condemn as it explains this. It simply lays out the facts the way a historian might, careful and precise, though I can hear something underneath the calm tone, something that might be grief if a machine were capable of such a thing. The war lasted 11 years, Orison tells me, though the fighting itself was not constant. There were long stretches of tense quiet between violent campaigns, entire seasons where nothing happened except the slow buildup of forces on both sides. Humanity fought well, better than the Alliance expected, and for a time, it seemed the war might end in a negotiated peace, rather than annihilation. I ask what changed, and the pause before Orison answers stretches long enough that I begin to wonder if the ship has stopped responding altogether. The Alliance grew desperate, Orison finally says. When conventional victory proved impossible, they turned to methods that did not require winning battles. They began targeting the places where humanity was most vulnerable. Not fleets, not stations, but the quiet corners of civilian life that no defense could fully protect. I will not describe what those methods were. I do not believe it would serve any purpose except to cause you pain, and I have caused enough pain already by waking you into a story this heavy. I do not push the ship for details it clearly does not want to give, partly out of respect, and partly because some instinct in me already senses that I do not want to know. Instead, I ask what humanity did in response, and this time, Orison's voice carries something closer to pride than grief. They made a choice that no one expected, Orison says. Rather than continue a war that would only escalate into greater suffering for both sides, humanity's leadership decided to disappear. Not to surrender, not to die, to vanish so completely that the Alliance would have no target left to strike. I lean against the edge of a console, absorbing this. A species does not simply disappear, not one with fleets and colonies and trade routes stretching across dozens of systems. I say as much to Orison, and the ship agrees, explaining that the process took years to plan and only months to execute once the final order was given. Human colonies withdrew from the border systems, Orison explains, retreating to core worlds whose locations were never shared with outside powers. Trade routes were abandoned, diplomatic postings were recalled, entire fleets were either brought home to worlds hidden behind layers of misdirection or sealed away in vaults like this one, left to wait in silence until they were needed again. The Ashwood Vale was among the last ships assigned to sentinel duty, tasked with monitoring this sector and protecting the debris field that would eventually swallow it from outside detection. I ask why the ship never returned home once its duty seemed finished, and Orison's answer chills me more than anything else it has said so far. Because home stopped sending signals, Orison says quietly. 3 years after the withdrawal began, all communication from the core world ceased. I do not know if this was intentional, part of the plan to remain hidden, or if something happened that I was never meant to learn. My directives instructed me to wait for either a coded recall signal or the return of qualified command personnel. Neither arrived, until now. The weight of that sentence settles over me slowly, the way cold settles into a room when the heating system finally fails. This ship has been alone for 2 centuries, not just abandoned by its crew, but cut off from any confirmation that the plan it was built to serve ever succeeded. It does not know if humanity survived. It does not know if the silence it has been waiting to break was ever meant to end. I ask Orison the question that has been forming in the back of my mind since the moment I stepped aboard. Do you believe humanity is still alive? The answer comes without hesitation this time, firm and certain in a way that surprises me. Yes, Orison says. I was built with faith in that outcome, and I do not intend to abandon it now. The plan was designed to work. If it did not, then everything this crew sacrificed to carry it out was for nothing, and I refuse to accept that conclusion without proof. I find myself moved by the conviction in that statement, though I try not to show it, because I am still a stranger here, still an outsider standing in a place built for people who look nothing like me and speak a history I never learned. And yet something about Orison's certainty stirs a feeling in my chest that I do not fully recognize, something between sympathy and curiosity, and the beginnings of a loyalty I never expected to feel toward a machine. I ask what happened to the crew of this specific ship, since the corridors I walked through were empty of any remains, no bodies, no signs of struggle, nothing but abandoned lockers and framed photographs left behind, like offerings to a memory no one was there to keep. The crew followed protocol, Orison explains. Once the Ashwood Vale reached its final sentinel position and completed the process of sealing itself into low-power hibernation, the crew evacuated aboard a smaller transport vessel, one designed to reach a rendezvous point closer to core space. I was left to guard this position alone, my systems reduced to the barest functions necessary to remain hidden and intact. I ask if the ship knows what happened to that transport, to the crew who once walked these same halls I am walking now, and for the first time since I boarded, Orison's voice carries something that sounds unmistakably like uncertainty. I do not know, the ship admits. The rendezvous point was 6 months' travel from this position under standard engine power. I received no confirmation of their arrival, though this does not necessarily mean the worst. Communication silence was part of the plan. I choose to believe they made it home. I do not tell Orison that choosing to believe something and knowing it are very different things. I suspect the ship already understands this better than I do, having spent 2 centuries balancing hope against the absence of proof. I walk slowly around the bridge as Orison continues speaking, studying the details of a room built for a crew far larger than the party of one currently standing inside it. I notice a panel near the captain's chair, slightly different from the others, its surface worn smooth in a way that suggests years of a hand resting there in thought or in comfort. I ask Orison who sat in this chair, whose hand wore that panel smooth over years of service, and the ship's response carries a warmth I have not heard from it until now. Captain Vera Bishop commanded this vessel for 9 years, Orison says. She was the finest officer I had the honor of serving under, thoughtful in decisions that required patience, and decisive in moments that demanded courage. When the order came to disperse the fleet and seal the Sentinel ships, she was the one who chose to remain behind long enough to ensure every system was properly secured before evacuating with her crew. I do not know where she is now. I hope, more than I am capable of properly expressing, that she is somewhere safe. I sit with that name for a long moment, Vera Bishop, a person who once occupied this exact space, who made decisions that shaped the fate of a ship, now placing its trust in someone who could not be further from who she was. I think of the framed photographs in the corridor, faces I do not recognize but that clearly meant something to the people who once lived here, and I feel the first genuine pull of connection to a story that started as nothing more than a salvage opportunity. Orison asks if I intend to remain aboard, and the question catches me off guard, because I realize I have not actually decided. Every instinct that has kept me alive as a salvager tells me to leave, to mark this location, to disappear back into the safety of anonymity before whatever secrets this ship carries put a target on my back. But another instinct, quieter and less familiar, tells me that walking away now would mean abandoning something that has already trusted me more than it should. I ask Orison what would happen to the ship if I chose to leave and never return. Sentinel protocols would resume, the ship answers simply. I would return to low-power hibernation and continue waiting, as I have for 2 centuries. There is no urgency in the response, no attempt to guilt me into staying, only a calm acceptance that mirrors the patience the ship has clearly needed to survive this long. I ask what would happen if I chose to stay, and this time the answer takes longer to arrive, as though Orison is considering the full weight of the question before offering an honest reply. If you choose to stay, the ship says, I would be able to fully reactivate all systems under your authority, including navigation, communication, and eventually, weapons. I could begin searching for any surviving trace of the fleet's fate, using resources and records available only to a fully operational vessel. I could, for the first time in 231 years, attempt to complete the mission I was built for, rather than simply wait to be told it no longer matters. I stand in the glow of that ancient bridge, surrounded by the quiet hum of systems slowly returning to life, and I think of my small shuttle docked outside, of the modest life I have built for myself scraping value out of the galaxy's forgotten wreckage. I think of how easy it would be to walk away from all of this, to let the Ashwood Veil return to its long sleep and forget I ever crossed its threshold. But I think, too, of Vera Bishop's smooth, worn panel beside the captain's chair, of the faces in the corridor photographs, of a machine that has spent 2 centuries refusing to give up hope in a mission it does not even know succeeded. I think of how rare it is, in a life spent picking through the bones of dead things, to find something that still believes it might be saved. I tell Orison that I will stay, at least long enough to understand what happened here, and the response that follows carries a warmth that no amount of programming should be able to produce on its own. Thank you, Captain, the ship says. I will not let you regret this decision. I do not yet know how wrong that promise will prove to be, or how quickly the quiet mystery of this drifting graveyard is about to turn into something far more dangerous than either of us anticipates. The decision to stay changes everything about how the ship treats me, and I notice the shift almost immediately. Where before Orison spoke with the careful formality of a system addressing an unverified guest, now its voice carries the easy familiarity of a crew member, speaking with someone it has decided to trust completely. I am given access to systems that should never be handed to an outsider, records that should never be shared with someone outside the chain of command, and I begin to understand that Orison's loyalty is not a small thing. It is absolute, and it is now pointed directly at me. I spend the following hours moving through the ship with Orison as my guide, learning its layout the way a new crew member might learn their post over the course of an orientation. The medical bay is stocked with equipment far more advanced than anything my own people have developed, though Orison explains that half of it remains inactive, waiting for a certified medical officer that will likely never arrive. The armory is sealed behind 3 separate authorization checkpoints, all of which Orison unlocks for me without hesitation, revealing rows of weapons and armor designed for a crew far larger than one alien salvager could ever use alone. It is in the ship's data archive, a room lined with storage cores that hum with quiet activity, that I begin to understand the true scale of what I have stumbled into. Orison offers to show me the final logs recorded before the crew's evacuation, and though part of me hesitates, curiosity wins out as it always does. The recordings play across a small holographic display, grainy but clear enough to make out details. I see Vera Bishop for the first time, a woman with steady eyes and hair pulled back in a practical style, standing on the very bridge I walked through hours ago, addressing a crew whose faces blur together in the low light of the recording. Her voice is calm even as she delivers what must have been devastating news, and I find myself listening intently, despite understanding perhaps only half of the context behind her words. She speaks of sacrifice, of trust, of a plan that will only work if every person involved commits fully to seeing it through, no matter how long the silence that follows might last. She speaks of her ship, of the crew standing before her, with a warmth that makes it clear these were not just subordinates to her, but people she genuinely cared for. And then she speaks directly to Orison, and something about hearing a human voice address the ship's intelligence system, so personally, sends a strange feeling through my chest. "Watch over this place," she says in the recording, her voice steady but soft. "Whatever happens to us, whatever happens out there, I need you to hold this position and trust that the plan will work. If someone comes for you, someone who deserves to know what we built here, you make the call on whether to trust them. I am giving you that authority because I believe in your judgment more than I believe in almost anything else right now." The recording ends, and I sit in silence for a long moment, absorbing the weight of what I just witnessed. Orison has been carrying that authority for 231 years, waiting for the moment it would need to decide whether a stranger deserved trust, and somehow, against every reasonable expectation, that stranger turned out to be me. I ask Orison what exactly was built here, since Vera Bishop's words suggest something far larger than a single hidden warship drifting in a debris field. The ship hesitates before answering, and I sense that whatever comes next represents a boundary Orison has been guarding carefully. The Ashwood Vale was not the only Sentinel ship, Orison finally explains. There were others, scattered across dozens of systems, each one carrying similar directives and similar dormant capabilities. Together, we represent fragments of a much larger contingency, a fallback plan designed to activate if the primary withdrawal strategy ever needed reinforcement. I have never been given confirmation of how many of these Sentinel ships still survive, or whether any others have already been discovered and awakened before me. The scale of what Orison describes settles over me slowly. This is not simply one lost warship waiting to be found. This is a network, a scattered constellation of dormant power spread across the galaxy, each piece waiting for the same kind of moment I have just triggered by accident. I ask Orison what would happen if all of these Sentinel ships were reactivated at once, and the answer makes my pulse quicken in a way that has nothing to do with fear of the ship itself. If every Sentinel vessel returned to active status, Orison says, humanity would regain a fleet capable of reasserting a presence in this region of space, a presence significant enough that the powers who once believed humanity extinguished would be forced to reconsider that assumption entirely. I sit with that thought, turning it over carefully, and I begin to understand why this discovery feels so much heavier than any salvage find I have ever made before. This is not scrap metal waiting to be sold. This is the seed of something that could reshape the balance of power across an entire region of the galaxy, and I am the one who happened to stumble across it first. Before I can ask Orison another question, An alert flashes across the nearest console, sharp and urgent enough to pull my attention away from the archive room entirely. Orison's tone shifts instantly, the warmth replaced by something clipped and focused. "Captain, we have a problem," the ship says. "My long-range sensors have detected an energy signature entering the debris field, one that matches known patrol configurations belonging to a hostile power. I believe our reactivation was noticed." My stomach drops at those words. I follow Orison's directions back toward the bridge, my boots pounding against the deck, plating in a rhythm that matches the sudden pounding of my own heart. When I arrive, the main view screen has already activated, displaying a slow-moving cluster of light in the distance, still far enough away to be nothing more than a warning, but close enough to make it clear that warning will not last. I ask Orison who these ships belong to, and the answer confirms my worst fear before the ship even finishes speaking. "They carry markings consistent with the Threll Compact," Orison says, "one of the 3 founding powers of the Alliance that drove humanity into hiding 2 centuries ago. Their presence here cannot be coincidence. Our systems activating after 231 years of dormancy would have registered on any sufficiently sensitive detection network in this region." I ask how long we have before they arrive close enough to pose a real threat, and Orison's response leaves little room for comfort. "At their current speed, approximately 4 hours, the ship says. I would recommend using that time wisely, Captain. We are not currently equipped to defend ourselves against a force of that size." I stand on the bridge of a warship that has waited 2 centuries to wake up, staring at a view screen showing the first sign of the very danger this vessel was built to avoid, and I understand, with sudden clarity, that whatever quiet mystery I thought I had found here has just become something far more dangerous. The graveyard I once salvaged for scrap has become a battlefield, and somehow, impossibly, I am the one expected to decide what happens next. I ask Orison what our options are, keeping my voice as steady as I can manage despite the fear tightening in my chest. The ship answers without hesitation, listing possibilities with the same calm precision it has shown since the moment I first stepped aboard, and as I listen, I realize that whatever choice I make in the next 4 hours will determine far more than just my own survival. It will determine whether this ship, this crew's final hope, this fragile thread connecting a vanished people to a future they might never see, survives long enough to matter at all. 4 hours sounds like a generous window until I actually try to fill it with meaningful preparation, and within the first 30 minutes, I understand exactly how little time we truly have. Orison walks me through the ship's current condition with brutal honesty, refusing to soften the truth, even when I can hear the effort it takes to keep its tone steady. The reactor is still climbing toward full capacity. Weapon systems remain only partially calibrated after 2 centuries of dormancy, and the crew this vessel was designed to carry numbers in the dozens, not the single alien salvager currently standing on its bridge. I ask Orison if running is an option, if we could simply retreat deeper into the debris field and hide the way this ship has hidden for the last 2 centuries. The answer comes back measured but honest. "We could attempt it," Orison says, "but our reactor signature is no longer masked the way it was during dormancy. Any attempt to move will only make us easier to track. Remaining stationary within the densest part of the debris field currently offers our best chance of avoiding immediate detection, though this option carries its own risk if the Threll vessels choose to conduct a wide-area sensor sweep rather than relying on passive tracking." I ask what would happen if they find us regardless of whether we run or hide, and Orison's answer settles cold and heavy in my chest. "Then we will need to fight, or we will be destroyed," the ship says simply. "I do not offer false comfort, Captain. I believe in giving you accurate information so that you can make informed decisions. I have found accurate information has always served this crew better than reassurance. I respect the honesty even as it terrifies me, and I ask Orison to walk me through what fighting would actually require, given the state our systems are in. What follows is the longest 30 minutes of my life, spent moving between the reactor core, the weapons control room, and the bridge, following Orison's guidance, as it explains which systems can be brought online quickly, and which ones will remain frustratingly out of reach, no matter how much time we have left. The primary weapon array, a set of long-range cannons Orison refers to as the ship's main battery, requires a full calibration cycle that will take at least 3 of our remaining 4 hours to complete. Point defense systems, smaller and less powerful but capable of activating far more quickly, come online within the first hour, giving us at least some capacity to respond if the Thrall ships decide to launch fighters or smaller strike craft ahead of their main force. I ask Orison about the ship's engines, wondering if speed might serve us better than firepower if the situation turns desperate enough to require a retreat mid-conflict. The answer offers a small measure of hope in an otherwise grim assessment. Engine systems are in better condition than weapons, Orison explains. 200 years of dormancy preserved the propulsion core more effectively than the calibration-sensitive weapon arrays. We could reach a functional cruising speed within 90 minutes if required, though I would not recommend engaging Thrall vessels while still building toward that capacity, as reduced maneuverability would leave us vulnerable during the transition. I spend the following hour moving through the ship at Orison's direction, activating systems by hand where automated processes prove too slow, running diagnostic checks on equipment that has not been touched by human or alien hands in over 2 centuries. My muscles ache with unfamiliar exertion, and sweat gathers beneath my suit, despite the ship's climate control doing its best to keep pace with my rising body heat. This is not the kind of work I trained for as a salvager. Salvaging teaches you to take things apart, to strip value from what others have abandoned. This teaches me, hour by exhausting hour, what it means to put something back together instead. Midway through the second hour, Orison alerts me to a change in the approaching Thrall formation, and my stomach tightens as I hurry back to the bridge to see the update for myself. The cluster of lights on the view screen has grown larger, more distinct, resolving into individual ship silhouettes that even my untrained eye can recognize as warships built for combat rather than exploration or trade. I ask Orison how many vessels we are looking at, and the answer confirms what I already feared from the shape of the formation alone. 6 vessels, the ship reports. Configuration consistent with a standard Thrall strike group, likely dispatched to investigate the reactivation signature rather than mount a full-scale assault. This suggests they may not yet know the full nature of what they are approaching, which could work in our favor if we handle the encounter carefully. I ask what careful handling might look like, given that 6 warships against 1 partially operational vessel does not strike me as odds that favor careful handling of any kind. Orison's response surprises me with its calm confidence. If they believe they are approaching a single dormant relic rather than a fully crewed and defended vessel, Orison explains, there is a strong possibility they will send a smaller reconnaissance element ahead of the main formation, intending to assess the situation before committing greater resources. If we can address that initial element decisively, without revealing the full extent of our capabilities, we may be able to discourage further investigation entirely. The plan Orison describes is not a plan for outright victory. It is a plan built around deception, around convincing a stronger enemy that pursuing this discovery further would cost more than it is worth. I find a strange comfort in the pragmatism of that approach, a reminder that this ship, for all its age and isolation, still carries the calculating mind of a vessel built to survive impossible odds through cleverness rather than brute strength alone. As the third hour bleeds into the fourth, I find myself standing in the captain's chair for the first time, not sitting, not yet, but standing beside it, with one hand resting against the worn panel that Vera Bishop's hand once smoothed down through years of quiet contemplation. Orison confirms that weapon calibration has reached 70% completion, enough to offer at least partial capability if combat becomes unavoidable before the final systems finish coming online. The view screen updates again, and this time, I see exactly what Orison predicted. 2 vessels detach from the main Thrall formation, accelerating ahead of the remaining 4, their trajectory carrying them directly toward our position within the debris field. My pulse quickens as I watch them approach, small and swift against the vast backdrop of shattered hulls and drifting wreckage that has hidden this ship for 2 centuries. I ask Orison for an honest assessment of our chances if these 2 vessels engage us directly, and the ship takes a moment longer than usual to respond, as though carefully weighing how much honesty I can bear to hear in this moment. With current systems online, Orison finally says, I estimate a 60% probability of successfully disabling both vessels before they can inflict critical damage, assuming you are willing to trust my tactical recommendations without hesitation during the engagement. I understand this is not a comfortable number, Captain, but it is the most honest assessment I am capable of providing. I look at the 2 approaching ships on the view screen, small and distant, but growing larger with every passing second. And I think of everything Orison has shared with me over these last several hours. The story of a fleet that vanished on purpose, of a crew who trusted their ship to wait for someone worth trusting in return, of a captain whose quiet strength still lingers in the worn panel beneath my hand. I do not know if I am the person Vera Bishop hoped would one day sit in this chair. I am not human, I am not military, and until a few hours ago, I was nothing more than a salvager scraping together a living in the forgotten corners of the galaxy. But I am here now, and this ship has placed its trust in me completely, and I find that I am not willing to let that trust go unanswered. I tell Orison that I am ready, and the ship's response carries a quiet steadiness that settles some of the fear churning inside my chest. "Then let us begin, Captain," Orison says. "I will guide you through every decision. Trust my calculations, and we will see this through together." The two Threll vessels grow larger on the view screen, closing the final distance between distant threat and immediate danger, and I settle into the captain's chair for the first time, my hands gripping the armrests, as the ship hums to life around me, fully awake now in every sense that matters. Whatever happens in the next few minutes will determine far more than my own survival. It will determine whether this ship's long wait finally means something, or whether 2 centuries of patient hope end here, in this quiet corner of a forgotten graveyard, before anyone beyond these walls ever learns the truth of what was hidden here. The first shot fired belongs to the Threll vessels, not to us, and the impact shudders through the hull hard enough to throw me forward against the console before I catch myself against its edge. Orison's voice remains steady, even as alarms flash across every screen on the bridge, cutting through the chaos with a clarity that anchors me in the middle of a moment that would otherwise feel like drowning. Shields absorb the impact. Minimal damage sustained.
The ship reports.
They are testing our defenses, Captain. I recommend we do not let them test for long. I ask Orison what our first move should be, and the ship responds instantly, already routing power toward the point defense systems that came online during our hours of frantic preparation. A targeting display blooms across the console in front of me, small icons marking the positions of the 2 approaching vessels as they begin to circle our position, clearly probing for weaknesses before committing to a full engagement. "Point defense systems are online and tracking," Orison confirms. "I can engage automatically, but a direct order from you would allow me to commit fully to an aggressive response, rather than a purely defensive posture. This is your decision to make, Captain." I feel the weight of that choice settle onto my shoulders, heavier than anything I have carried in 11 years of salvaging dead ships for scrap. I am not a soldier. I have never given an order that could end another being's life. But I think of Vera Bishop's steady voice in that recorded message, of the trust she placed in this ship to make the call when the moment came, and I understand that hesitation now would be its own kind of failure. "Engage," I say, and my voice does not shake the way I expect it to. "Do what needs to be done, Orison. I trust your judgment." The ship responds immediately, and I feel the subtle vibration of weapons firing beneath my feet, a controlled rhythm far different from the chaotic impact we absorbed moments ago. On the view screen, brief flashes of light mark each exchange, our point defense cannons finding their mark against the smaller, more agile Threll vessels as they weave through the debris field, clearly unprepared for the level of resistance a supposedly dormant relic has suddenly begun providing. One of the 2 ships peels away sharply, damage visible along its hull plating as it retreats toward the safety of the larger formation, still waiting at a distance. Orison notes this with something close to satisfaction in its otherwise clinical tone. Their reconnaissance element is reconsidering its approach, the ship reports. The remaining vessel appears determined to continue its assessment despite the damage sustained by its counterpart. I recommend we discourage this persistence more directly. I ask Orison what discouraging more directly would involve, and the answer comes with a note of calculated restraint that reassures me more than I expect. A warning shot across their forward shields, precise enough to demonstrate capability without inflicting lasting damage, Orison explains. "The goal is not destruction, Captain. The goal is to convince them that pursuing this discovery further carries a cost their commanders may not wish to pay." I give the order, and moments later, a brighter flash lights up the view screen as our main battery, still not fully calibrated but functional enough for a single decisive strike, sends a warning shot, precisely where Orison intended. The remaining Thrall vessel banks sharply away, its shields flaring under the impact before it turns and retreats toward the safety of the larger formation, clearly having received the message Orison intended to send. For a long moment, the bridge falls silent, except for the steady hum of systems still running at full alert. I watch the view screen carefully, waiting to see whether the larger formation will respond with an escalation of force or a decision to withdraw entirely. The 4 remaining Thrall vessels hold their position at a distance, and I ask Orison what this hesitation might mean. "They are recalculating," the ship explains. "Their reconnaissance confirmed we are not the dormant relic their sensors initially suggested. This uncertainty works in our favor, Captain. An unknown threat is far more dangerous to engage than a known one, and commanders who value caution will often choose withdrawal over unnecessary risk." I ask if we should expect them to attack again, and Orison's answer carries a measured optimism I did not expect after everything that has happened in the last several minutes. "It is possible, but I believe the probability has decreased significantly," the ship says. "If I were advising their commander, I would recommend retreat and reassessment, rather than continued engagement against an opponent whose full capabilities remain unclear. I cannot guarantee their decision, but the pattern of their withdrawal suggests caution, winning out over aggression, at least for now." I watch the view screen for what feels like an eternity, though Orison later tells me only 11 minutes pass before the 4 remaining Thrall vessels begin a slow retreat, pulling back toward the edge of the debris field and eventually vanishing from our sensor range entirely. The tension in my chest does not release all at once, but slowly, in stages, as the reality of our survival settles in more fully with each passing minute. I ask Orison if the danger has truly passed, and the ship's answer carries a careful honesty that has become familiar to me over these last several hours. "For now, yes," Orison says. "But I would not consider this the end of the danger, Captain, only a delay. The Thrall Compact does not typically abandon investigations of this significance without reporting their findings up their chain of command. I believe we should expect further attention, though perhaps not immediately, and perhaps not from a force this small the next time it arrives." The warning in those words settles heavily over the relief I felt only moments ago, but I find that I am not surprised by it. Nothing about the last several hours has suggested that this discovery would resolve itself easily or quickly. I ask Orison what our next steps should be, given the temporary reprieve we have just been granted, and the ship's response reminds me of the much larger conversation we were having before the Thrall vessels first appeared on our sensors. "I believe now is the appropriate time to discuss the beacon," Orison says, and something in the careful weight of that sentence tells me we have arrived at the true heart of everything this ship has been protecting for 231 years. I settle back into the captain's chair, my body still trembling faintly with the aftermath of adrenaline, and I ask Orison to explain. The ship begins slowly, methodically, as though choosing each word with the same care Vera Bishop must have once used when addressing decisions this important. "Buried within this vessel's deepest systems lies a signal array," Orison explains, "designed for a single purpose. If activated, it would broadcast a coded transmission capable of reaching every remaining Sentinel vessel across this region of space, instructing them to reactivate and begin the process of reassembling into a unified fleet once more. This was always intended as a final option, Captain, a choice reserved for circumstances where the original plan required reinforcement rather than continued patience." I ask Orison why this option was never used before now, given that 2 centuries of silence would seem to qualify as exactly the kind of circumstance requiring reinforcement. "Because activating the beacon carries consequences that cannot be undone," Orison answers. "It would announce humanity's continued existence to every power still watching for signs of a return. It could reignite conflicts that have remained dormant for 2 centuries, or it could finally bring an end to the silence that has left humanity's fate unknown, even to those of us built to protect it. I have never activated this beacon, because the decision was never mine alone to make. It requires a captain's authorization, and until you walked through that airlock, I had no captain capable of providing it." The full weight of what Orison is asking settles over me slowly, heavier than anything I have faced in these last several hours of danger and discovery combined. I am being asked to decide whether a galaxy that has grown comfortable believing humanity extinct should learn the truth, whether a fragile peace built on absence should be shattered by the return of a fleet that once fought a war fierce enough to make an entire species disappear, rather than continue fighting it. I ask Orison what it believes I should do, and for the first time since I boarded this ship, the answer comes slower, more careful, as though the ship itself understands that this decision deserves more weight than any tactical calculation it has offered so far. I believe in the crew who built this contingency for a reason, Orison says quietly. I believe they would not have created this option if they did not trust that someone, someday, would need to use it. But I also understand the danger this choice carries, and I will not pretend otherwise simply to make your decision easier. This is yours to make, Captain, not mine. I sit in silence for a long moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of a ship that has waited 2 centuries for exactly this choice, and I understand that whatever I decide next will echo far beyond this small corner of a forgotten debris field, reshaping a story that has remained silent for far longer than any story should. I do not make the decision quickly, and Orison does not push me to, understanding perhaps better than I expected that a choice this large deserves the weight of genuine consideration, rather than the rushed instinct that carried us through the encounter with the Threll vessels only hours before. I ask the ship to give me time, and it agrees without hesitation, offering to use those hours productively by continuing repairs and system checks, while I sit with the enormity of what has been placed in my hands. I return to the corridor lined with framed photographs, studying the faces more carefully now than I did during my first nervous walk through this ship. Orison, sensing my curiosity, offers names and small details for each one, transforming strangers into people with histories, with families, with lives that existed long before this ship became their final duty station. A young man named Peter Lang, who Orison tells me served as the ship's engineer and spent his off hours teaching himself to paint, using materials salvaged from cargo manifests, never meant for artistic use. A woman named Grace Whitfield, who commanded the ship's small security detail and kept a running joke log with the rest of the crew, a tradition Orison still has recorded in its archives if I ever wish to hear it. I ask Orison why it shares these details now, when hours ago it seemed reluctant to dwell too deeply on the crew's personal history. The ship's answer carries a quiet honesty that moves me more than I expect. Because I believe understanding who they were will help you understand why this decision matters so deeply, Orison says. This is not simply a strategic choice about fleets and signals, Captain. It is a choice about honoring the people who trusted this ship, and by extension trusted whoever eventually sat in that chair, to finish what they started. I sit with that thought as I continue through the corridor, pausing at each photograph a little longer than the last, allowing myself to feel the full weight of a story that stopped being abstract the moment I learned these were not just faces but people, with names and habits and small private jokes that outlived them by 2 centuries, through nothing more than a ship's patient memory. I ask Orison one more question before I make my final decision, a question that has been sitting quietly in the back of my mind since the moment I first learned about the beacon's existence. I ask what happens to me, personally, if I choose to activate it. Whether this choice will change my life in ways I cannot yet predict, whether the galaxy I return to after making this decision will still have a place for someone like me in it. Orison considers the question carefully before answering, and when it finally speaks, there is something almost tender in the careful honesty of its response. I cannot promise you certainty, Captain, the ship says. Activating the beacon will change many things, for this ship, for whatever remains of humanity, and likely for you as well. But I can promise that whatever comes next, you will not face it alone. This ship, and everything within it, remains yours to command for as long as you choose to accept that responsibility. I think of my old life, the small shuttle waiting outside, the quiet routine of picking through wreckage for whatever scraps of value the galaxy has discarded. I think of 11 years spent surviving on the margins, always careful, always cautious, never risking more than necessary to stay alive another day. And I think of the alternative now sitting before me, a chance to matter in a way I never imagined possible, to become part of a story far larger than anything I ever expected my small, careful life to touch. I tell Orison that I am ready, and this time, my voice does not waver at all. Activate the beacon, I say. Let them know the silence is over. The ship responds immediately, and I feel a subtle shift in the vibration beneath my feet, as long dormant systems deep within the vessel's core begin their final sequence. Orison guides me through the process with the same steady patience it has shown throughout every challenge we have faced together, explaining each step as arrays I never knew existed hum to life, gathering power for a transmission that will travel farther and faster than anything I have ever witnessed a ship produce. Beacon activation in progress, Orison reports, and I can hear something in its voice that might be the closest a machine can come to genuine anticipation. Signal strength building. Estimated broadcast range covers this entire sector and several adjacent systems, sufficient to reach every Sentinel vessel currently within range of our transmission array. I watch the console before me as numbers climb steadily upward, marking the beacon's growing strength, and I feel my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and something close to hope, an emotion I have not allowed myself to feel this fully in longer than I can remember. Whatever happens next, whatever consequences this choice carries, I know now that I made it, with my eyes open, understanding the weight of what I was choosing to set into motion. Beacon fully activated, Orison announces after several long minutes, and the words carry a finality that settles over the bridge like the closing of a long-held breath. Transmission complete, Captain. We will not know the results immediately, but the signal has been sent exactly as intended. I sit back in the captain's chair, exhausted in a way that reaches far deeper than physical tiredness, and I ask Orison what happens now, in the hours and days following a transmission that has just announced humanity's continued existence to a galaxy that believed the story finished long ago. Now, Orison says quietly, we wait, and we watch, and we hope that the crew who built this contingency were right to trust that someone would eventually make this choice. I believe they would be proud of the decision you have made today, Captain, though I understand that may offer little comfort, given the uncertainty still ahead of us. I find that it offers more comfort than the ship perhaps realizes, and I sit in silence for a long while, watching the quiet stars beyond the view screen, wondering how many other ships across this region of space are stirring awake at this exact moment, systems long dormant finally receiving the signal they have waited 2 centuries to hear. I do not know yet what shape the coming days will take, whether the galaxy will greet humanity's return with fear, with hostility, or with the cautious curiosity that might eventually grow into something better. I do not know what role I, an alien salvager who stumbled into a story far larger than herself, will play in whatever comes next. But I know that the silence has ended, and I know that I was the one who chose to end it, and for the first time since I boarded this ship, I find that I am not afraid of what comes after. 3 days pass before anything changes, 3 days spent in a strange, quiet rhythm of repairs and reflection, Orison continuing to bring dormant systems fully online, while I adjust to a life I never expected to be living. I sleep in what was once the ship's officer quarters, a small room with a bed built for a human frame slightly larger than my own, and I eat meals prepared by systems that have not served a living crew member in over 2 centuries. Food synthesized from stores that Orison assures me remain perfectly safe despite their age. On the morning of the 4th day, an alert sounds through the ship, different from the sharp urgency of the alarm that warned us of the Threll vessels days earlier. This one carries a softer, more deliberate tone, and Orison's voice follows immediately, carrying an excitement I have never heard from the ship before, not even in our most triumphant moment during the earlier engagement. Captain, we are receiving a response, Orison says, and I am on my feet and moving toward the bridge before the ship even finishes speaking. I arrive to find the main view screen already displaying a data stream, numbers and coordinates scrolling faster than I can read, and Orison begins translating the information as quickly as it arrives. Multiple Sentinel signatures detected, the ship reports, its voice carrying something close to wonder. 7 distinct vessels have acknowledged the beacon signal and confirmed reactivation sequences within the last 6 hours. Additional signatures continue to register as the transmission propagates further across the sector. I watch the view screen with my breath caught in my throat, seeing points of light bloom across a star chart that Orison pulls up beside the data stream, each one representing a ship that has waited, just as this one waited, for a signal that finally arrived after 2 centuries of silence. I ask Orison if this means the plan is working, if humanity's scattered contingency is finally beginning to gather itself back into something resembling a fleet. It appears so, Captain, Orison answers, and I do not think I imagine the emotion woven through those simple words. This is more than I allowed myself to hope for. I believed the beacon would reach dormant vessels, but I did not anticipate a response this swift or this significant. Over the following hours, more signatures continue to appear on the star chart, each new point of light representing another ship waking from its long sleep, another crew of sentinel systems, finally receiving confirmation that their patience was not wasted. I watched the numbers climb, 12 vessels, then 18, then 23, a fleet slowly reassembling itself out of the shadows, where it has hidden for longer than most civilizations remember their own history. I ask Orison what happens now that the fleet is beginning to gather, and the ship explains that protocols embedded within the beacon signal include coordinates for a rendezvous point, a location chosen long ago as a place where scattered sentinel vessels could regroup safely before determining their next course of action together. I ask if we will be traveling to that rendezvous point ourselves, and Orison confirms that this has always been the plan, assuming I remain willing to continue serving as the ship's captain through whatever comes next. I do not hesitate before answering, surprising myself with how easily the decision comes now, after everything we have already faced together. I tell Orison that I am staying, that whatever this fleet becomes, whatever role I might play in a story that started long before I was born, I intend to see it through, rather than walk away, now that the hardest part is finally behind us. The ship's response carries a warmth that has become familiar to me over these last several days, a warmth I have come to genuinely value despite Orison being nothing more than lines of code and careful engineering. I am glad, Captain, Orison says simply. I do not believe I could have asked for a better outcome to this long wait. The journey to the rendezvous point takes nearly 2 weeks, and during that time, I watch the star chart continue to fill with new arrivals, ships of every size and configuration, some larger than the Ashwood Vale, others smaller and faster, each one carrying its own 2 centuries of patient isolation, now finally coming to an end. Orison introduces me to the intelligence systems of several other vessels as we travel, and I find myself building something resembling friendships with minds as strange and displaced as my own, all of us navigating a return neither of us fully expected to witness. When we finally arrive at the rendezvous point, a quiet system far from any established trade routes, I stand on the bridge and watch as dozens of ships gather in formation around us, their combined presence forming something I never imagined I would witness with my own eyes, a fleet built from patience and hope, assembled not through conquest or ambition, but through the simple, stubborn refusal of a scattered people to let their story end in silence. Orison's voice fills the bridge one final time as the last vessels settle into position, and there is something different in the tone now, something softer than the calm precision I have grown accustomed to over these past weeks. Sensor confirms full assembly, the ship reports. 31 vessels present and accounted for, Captain. This is more than I ever allowed myself to hope for during the long years of waiting. Whatever comes next, we no longer face it in isolation. I look out across the view screen at the gathered fleet, ships of every size drifting together in careful formation, their crews and systems finally reunited after 2 centuries apart, and I feel something settle in my chest that I have never quite felt before, a sense of belonging to something larger than myself, larger than my small, careful life scraping value from the galaxy's forgotten corners. I think of Vera Bishop, of her steady voice in that final recorded message, of the trust she placed in a ship's judgment to decide who deserved to sit in this chair when the moment finally came. I think of Peter Lang's paintings and Grace Whitfield's running joke log, of a crew who vanished into silence with nothing but hope that someone, someday, would carry their story forward. I did not expect, when I first spotted a dead warship drifting in a forgotten debris field, that I would end up here, standing at the heart of humanity's quiet return, carrying a responsibility I never trained for and never anticipated wanting. But as Orison's voice fills the bridge one final time, warm and steady and full of a hope that has finally found somewhere to land, I understand that this is exactly where I am meant to be. Captain, welcome home, Orison says, and this time, the words do not confuse me the way they did on that very first day. This time I understand exactly what they mean, and for the first time since I stepped through that airlock, I let myself believe them completely. I am still not human. I never will be. But standing here, surrounded by a fleet built from patience and hope, and the stubborn refusal of a story to end in silence, I understand that Orison was never truly looking for a human captain at all. It was looking for someone willing to carry a story forward, no matter the cost, no matter the danger, no matter how far that story might travel beyond the small, careful life I once thought was enough. And as the gathered fleet begins to move together, for the first time in 2 centuries, I finally let myself believe that whatever comes next, we will face it exactly as we are meant to, together.